Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Heather Long from CNN, and I'm excited to be here tonight with Seanan McGuire, the best-selling New York Times author. We're going to be chatting about a number of topics like books and fairies and feminism and badass heroines. I think I'm allowed to say that on the family-friendly chat. And I don't know about you, Seanan, but I'm extra excited to be having this conversation on International Women's Day.
Yes,
It comes around once a year. It feels very timely.
it
Uh,
does.
so we are actually doing this chat in honor of the Pixel Project, which is a wonderful initiative that raises awareness and supports causes to stop violence against women around the world. Seanan is one of 13 best-selling authors who are joining the Pixel Project for the Read for Pixels campaign this month. The goal is to raise awareness and funds to stop violence against women. We encourage you to check it out. The Pixel Project's website is www.thepixelproject.net, or you can follow them on Twitter at Pixel Project. Tonight, we'll throw it over to Seanan. We're super excited to have you with us. As many people watching this probably no doubt know, she is the author of the OCTOBER DAYE series. I believe book 9 is coming out later this year. Very excited about that. She is also the author of the Encrypted series. And if that's not enough, you also write about zombie worlds under the title Mira Grant, and you're a musician and a cartoonist. Her latest book is Pocket Apocalypse, which just came out on March 3rd. Seanan's currently been touring the country, and you can see more about her upcoming dates on her website. But I have to say, Seanan, my favorite part of your bio is the line that you have yet to be defeated in a game of anyone being bitten by something stranger than you have. And I was curious if anyone has even come close to being bitten by anything as odd as you have.
Well, I double majored in herpetology and folklore at the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears. So I knew a lot of herpetologists. I still know a lot of herpetologists. And I've met several entomologists. I can never remember how to say the word bug scientists. And it turns out that when you get the bug scientists and the snake scientists in the same room, someone there has been bitten by something that you don't think anybody's ever been bitten by. Pretty much across the board. So I've had some folks come close. I had one gentleman who had actually been bitten by a green anaconda that took his arm up to the elbow. Did give it back, so that was good. We had one lady who had been bitten by an entire swarm of bullet ants, which are a type of South American ant. They have heads so large that when they drop out of trees to land on you, you can hear them screaming. And the pain of a bite is so intense that it feels like you've just been shot by a bullet. It takes 24 full hours for it to reduce at all. So that is not a thing I'm eager to experience anytime soon. Probably the weirdest thing I've met someone else that has been bitten by, though, was the zookeeper who told me very, very sadly, that she had been bitten by a platypus, a baby platypus, and I was puzzled because they've got those beaks. They don't open that wide, and apparently it just got on there and wouldn't get off her hand. Wow. So
that's definitely an unusual one. I think that wins for unusual. But
yeah.
Before we kick off some more questions, I just want to mention that Seanan has offered a really great, what we're calling a perk, that she will write for 4 different lucky people who make a small donation to the Pixel Project. She will write a poem, a sonnet or a drabble, based on a word that someone sends her. And I believe 3 of those have already been claimed, but there's 1 more left. And I have to ask, I believe you started writing sonnets when you were 6. Can you tell us a little bit how that happened? And
I have an aunt who is a child psychologist, and what that really means is that I was part of a small experimental pool for my aunt of available child subjects. As I was getting ready to go into kindergarten, she had this theory, which I do think is partially true, just not universally, that a lot of things we think are hard when we are younger, we think we're hard because we are told that they are hard. So when you say a sonnet is this incredibly beautiful, complicated art form that Shakespeare practiced and it's amazingly difficult, well, it is difficult to do a good sonnet. But just writing a sonnet is actually pretty easy. You only need to be able to count to 10. So as I was getting ready to go into kindergarten, she sat me down and said, okay, let's go over the things you're going to need to be able to do. They're going to want you to be able to spell simple three-letter words. Can you do that? Can you spell cat? C-A-T. Can you spell and? A-N-D. Great. They're going to want you to be able to make simple rhymes. Can you do that? Can you find a rhyme for pig? Jig. Can you find a rhyme for head? Bed. Okay, great. They're going to want you to be able to count to 10. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm feeling like a genius. And then she says, and they're going to need you to be able to write simple poetry. So I'm going to teach you the easiest form of poetry there is. It's called a sonnet. You just count to 10. And when you really break it down, it's 3 quatrains, so 3 4-line verses with a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. That's not hard. You can pig jig your way through that. And then you have your closing couplet, which is just GG. So I went to school, and as soon as my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Emke, said, and we're gonna write a poem today, I was like, yes! I prepared for this. I have done my homework. And so I wrote a sonnet about my cat. My mom still has it somewhere. It's a terrible sonnet. There's no iambic pentameter. The form is bad. The rhymes are puerile. I was 6. I'm pretty sure I get a pass on most of that. And that triggered our first parent-teacher conference because Mrs. Emke was pretty sure I had committed plagiarism at the age of 6.
Right. That's great. Well, that means it was probably better than you think if she thought you plagiarized it.
It was pretty terrible. It was also a standard Shakespearean sonnet. If you're out there and thinking about grabbing that 4th item and wanted a sonnet, or if you're one of the 3 people that already has, you will get to pick the sonnet form. So I can do Shakespearean, Spenserian, loop de tonal, modern, whatever. A sonnet is just a 14-line poem. We can work it out.
And I know I was going to ask you if there were any words you didn't want, but maybe I'll flip the question around and say, have you been given words that turned out to make a really good poem in the past when readers had a chance to give you words?
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned that I was a musician. This is not a plug. This is just relevant. There's a song on my latest album, Wicked Girls, called How Much Salt, which actually started out as a poem where someone gave me 3 words. And what they gave me was salt, bind, and tell. And so I wrote this poem where the first verse is, how much salt to bind a man, tell me, mama, tell me. How much sea and how much sand, tell me, mama, tell me. How much water, how much land, how much salt to bind a man to bring him here at my command, tell me, mama, tell me. And then the whole poem just kind of followed from there, and we wound up setting it to music. It's a really lovely song.
Wow.
If the words mean something to you, if they are important to you, they will probably produce good art. They don't actually have to be important to me. I assume any word that I'm given in a situation like this is really important to the person who got to give it. So...
Well, that's a great talent. Yes, if somebody had given me salt, I would not have produced something that beautiful. I want to switch a little bit. I'm sure readers are interested in hearing more about Pocket Apocalypse, which has just come out, and many people are making their way through it.
Yes.
At the heart, this series is really about family, which so many of us can relate to and love and understand. And now we get to meet a new family, the Tanners, and go to Australia. Well, I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying go to Australia and read this book. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your own family, and are there any, perhaps any McGuires who've been Tuckerized a bit into the encrypted series?
I have written none of my family members into anything because I have to see them. My friends are totally honored and excited when they get written into things and killed brutally, and my family gets mad at me. So since no one is ever off the table so far as murder goes, I don't write my family in. My mother was a single mother of 3, so we did grow up below the poverty line here in California. I grew up on welfare. It's why one of the quickest ways to take me from 0 to yelling is to start talking about food stamp fraud. As if it were endemic, which it's not, and as if, had my mother been committing some form of fraud, I would have deserved to starve, and my sisters would have deserved to starve. Our welfare system is very, very broken. I have a large extended family. We're a big Irish Catholic family, which means we breed like rabbits. Near as we can tell, I am related to the state of Indiana. It is not uncommon upon meeting someone from Indiana for the conversation to go, really? Where are you people from? How far back you got a Sittler? I think we're cousins. Let's check the family tree. You're my third cousin. Surprise! I have two sisters that share a mother with me, and one of them lives with me, Rachel. She is a hairdresser. She does my hair. And the other is Melissa. She and her wife live up in Reading with their 3 kids, and Melissa is a construction worker, which is very difficult and not a thing I could do. My mom likes to joke that she produced a white-collar worker, a blue-collar worker, and a no-collar worker when talking about me, Melissa, and Rachel.
That's great.
Yeah, so we get on pretty well at this point.
That's great. One of the things that's come up as readers are making their way through Pocket Apocalypse is Shelby Tanner's very overprotective father. And particularly tonight, as we talk about sort of women's rights and women trying to overcome difficult situations, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the decision to have that very overprotective father in this book.
Well, I was going for a kind of parent we hadn't seen, really. The thing about the encrypted books is that they are a generational saga. So it's not just, I hate the word saga, but it's the only thing I have. It's not just this generation of characters, it's the generation before them and the generation before them, and a certain element of how what happens to your parents will have informed how they bring you up, which then informs who you are as a person. We've seen a kind of overprotective father before in that Alice, who is the grandmother of the current generation of characters, her dad was very overprotective, but it was in the I want you to get a man, get married, and get out of this business as quickly as possible, the domestication. With Shelby, her father is very overprotective, but he's very overprotective out of a combination of no one is good enough for you, which is a thing I think a lot of us fall into when talking about our children or even our closest friends. That's a reaction I see a lot when good friends start dating, is that person's not good enough because they're not as good as you are. And a certain element of Alex really is coming from an enemy camp. So that is, my family is both Catholic and Protestant, and whenever the lines cross, oh, boom, boom. So I wanted to go there, but I also sometimes want to do things like that because I made a promise to my readers several years ago that none of my characters would ever be sexually assaulted or specifically battered on because of gender. Everyone gets the snot kicked out of them on a regular basis because I write books with a lot of action and people have fight scenes, but it's never I want to hit you because you're a girl, it's I want to hit you because you're between me and my goal. And part of that is that by avoiding those specific kinds of gendered violence, I can dig into certain other things without my readers having to be scared. I have known books where if the super overprotective father showed up, one of the daughters was getting smacked in the face before terribly long. Yeah. And it was going to be a very clear be seen and not heard. That makes me uncomfortable, but my dad never hit me. For someone whose father was physically abusive in that way, either toward them, toward their mother, or both, that is jarring and uncomfortable. But I know I'm kind of rambly right now, but it's mostly that I wanted to go to a place that people take to a bad gendered violence place and show that you don't have to. You can still have the discomfort and the conflict and the interesting collision without having to get either cheap or triggering about it.
I'm actually so glad you brought up that essay. I love it. I believe it was written in 2012 and is entitled "Things I Will Not Do to My Characters Ever." And if readers haven't read through that, I would encourage them to read again. I actually wanted to just read a few lines from that post and then have you respond and react to it a little bit because it's so powerful. The lines that I really jumped out at me were, I do not understand, I will not understand, I refuse to understand why rape has to be on the table for every story with a female protagonist. or even a strong female supporting cast. Why it's so assumed that I'm being unrealistic when I say that none of my female characters are going to be raped. That came from the wonderful essay. I was just trying to reflect on, do you feel even stronger about that now? That was written in 2012. And why do you think it would be expected that a female heroine, I believe you wrote that about Toby Day in this case, would be raped?
We've turned rape culturally into shorthand for the ultimate evil. There are good reasons for a good character to kill somebody. We have the manslaughter spectrum, we have the self-defense spectrum, we even have the I was a murderer but I have redeemed myself and am working to be better spectrum. So we've taken death off the table as a sign of serious evil, which leaves rape and animal abuse as the unforgivable sins for a fictional character. And what I have found consistently as an author is that people get angrier over animal abuse than they do over abuse of female characters.
Wow.
If you kill a dog, you will get more hate mail than if you rape a woman. And this narrative honestly works against us on every level, because if I say rape is always a stranger in the bushes with a knife, it is a punishment for daring to walk outside in a short skirt, it is a sign that this character is an absolute villain and cannot be redeemed, we're erasing, acquaintance rape, we're erasing date rape, we're erasing all of these shades where consent is blurry. We look at the popularity of blurred lines. I have seen people genuinely stunned to think this song is about rape. And so I do wind up just feeling more and more strongly. Also, I get not a lot of mail, but a reasonable amount of mail from people going, I thank you. I may have lost some readers, I'll never know, but I get at least one letter per book from at least one woman I've never heard of before, someone I don't know, going, I was reading this book and Verity is in a bathrobe and disarmed and strapped to a chair, and I started tensing up because I knew what was going to happen. And then I remembered that you wrote this and I was able to relax and enjoy this bond moment without worrying that the character was suddenly going to be assaulted. It is such a tiny thing. It takes one tool, and it's a lazy tool, out of my box. I have encountered, in all the time I've been reading, maybe 4 books where rape was the only way to get the situation that was needed for the story. And in one of those, Robin McKinley's Deerskin, which is an adaptation of an old fairy tale called Donkey Skin, it's really a book about surviving and growing and strengthening yourself after you've been sexually assaulted. I highly recommend it. It's a highly uncomfortable book that I love very much. And you couldn't write Deerskin without rape. But most books that include rape, it's just a quick, easy way to say this person is evil, and either this woman needs to be punished or this woman needs to rise above. There are so many other ways to say this person is evil. There are so many other ways to say this woman needs to rise above. If I were invited to an anthology entirely of rape survival stories, I would probably turn them down, because that is not a book I feel we have a need for anymore. But that is about the only situation where I would consider, even in that context, going back on the pledge. Because it's such a small thing, and it makes such a big difference for the people it matters to.
Definitely. I was really glad that you brought up the point about how people respond to animal abuse versus how people sometimes respond to violence against women. Obviously, many of your fans know you are a huge animal lover and supporter yourself. Your 2 cats are practically famous on the web. But I have to say, I work in the news business, and I can tell you it's the same for us, that we get far more letters to the editor and emails in response to stories that are talking about animal abuse than that are talking about abuse against women, and it's something that I just can't comprehend. It's so hard to comprehend why that is. And I'm wondering, kind of maybe as a follow-up, what other actions you think influential authors like you can do to help sort of raise awareness about what's going on around these issues of violence against women? You've obviously taken a very big stand with your essay, and with what you've said you will not include against your female heroines. Have you had discussion with other authors, or do you hope more authors will follow your lead?
I would like people to be more mindful of using rape. I think that the problem we run into when talking about violence in women in fiction is a lot of the time I say I don't write rape and people hear you're telling me what to write. I'm not. I'm saying be more mindful. And I think that is the thing that we can all do. We can be more mindful. We can not eroticize this. I'm a huge horror fan. I love reading horror. And there used to be this publisher, Dorchester. They went out of business, but while they were still going, they had multiple genre-specific book club lines that would put out at least one new book a month. So they had leisure horror, leisure westerns, leisure crime. They were fantastic for being able to keep up with what is going on in a genre, being able to read new voices in the genre. It was great, except for the part where 3 out of 4 of the horror novels involved not only rape, but eroticized rape. So it's not just this bad thing has happened, it's I will now spend 2 paragraphs lovingly describing the way her breasts bounced while she was being violated. There is no reason for that. There is no need for that. We need to think harder. We need to be better. And we need to talk about the fact that this is a reality, that this is a thing that happens. We also need to acknowledge when we're talking about rape that it is not always as cut and dried as we think it is. That you can be in a situation where consent has not been clearly and cleanly given and where the other person's understanding of consent is different. That does not absolve you. You need to be getting that clear, obvious, open consent. And as writers, we can demonstrate that. We can show clear, clean, obvious consent. That's a power we have because our fictional worlds are frankly simpler than the real one.
Right, right. You've spoken yourself about having received online abuse. This is very common, unfortunately, for women who are writing online, who are active on Twitter even. It was frustrating this weekend to see there was a hashtag trending for a while alongside feminism and the celebration of International Women's Day. There were things like feminism is awful as a hashtag, and just I'm curious, is this still a regular occurrence that you get this kind of flashback and negative feedback, or do you think it's getting a little better?
Well, I don't know, because at this point I have a PA that goes through my email. So I don't see the really bad stuff anymore. There was an incident a couple years ago where one of the major retailers decided to release a book of mine almost a month early. And they did not have the ebook files because it is standard practice that the ebook file transmission doesn't happen to the various retailers until a week before the book goes live. So they started shipping out physical copies, but they could not sell ebooks. And the reaction from certain parts of the ebook community, and this is not an indictment of the whole ebook community, every community has its extremists, but the reaction from certain parts of it was to decide that I was a print-worshipping Luddite and start flooding my inbox with abuse. We are a pre-watershed hangout, so I will not repeat the things that they called me, but some of those words I had never heard used for me that many times in a 24-hour period. It was horrifying. It was deeply distressing. I had one person during that specific breakdown of communications and civility email to tell me that he wasn't going to rape me because I was too ugly to rape, but he was going to rape my best friend, and he gave a very good physical description of her, because you can if you follow my internet, you can figure out what Vixie looks like. Gave a very clean physical description of her so that he would know that I knew who he meant. He was going to rape her in front of me so I would understand what it was like to be denied what I wanted. And I kind of went, well, okay, you're frightening. I don't think you know where I live, but I'm going to just tell Vixie's husband and not deal with you. I get a lot more threats of harm to my cats than I do of harm to me, interestingly.
Interesting.
Because I have I have two Maine Coons. They both came from a reputable breeder. I have volunteered with the SPCA since I was 9 years old. I do adoption fairs, I donate, I help with animals that are in need. But one unfortunate consequence of this was that I had a whole bunch of cats die on me in very quick succession from genetic problems that we didn't know that they had, because they were descended from a cat that had a tendency toward kidney problems or whatnot. My heart can't take it. Anyone who checks my Twitter stream will see very quickly that my cats are kind of terrifyingly important to me. They are the center of my world. So I need to meet the grandparents of any kitten that I'm bringing home. I need, for my own mental health, to know what I'm getting. And unfortunately, there are some people who feel that because I am a public figure, the fact that I don't rescue, that I go to a breeder, is sending a bad message, that I am a bad person because I don't go to a rescue. So I've gotten quite a bit of email threatening to come to my house and kill my cats, and then a few follow-ups that have said, if after they do that I go to a breeder again instead of going to a rescue, they'll just come and do it again. Until I have good rescue cats like everybody else and stop putting on airs, they're just going to murder my babies.
I do sometimes wonder, I don't know about you, but if male authors get the same types of abuse, particularly in the example you had given, your book, it wasn't even your fault that the publisher accidentally released it a little bit early, the ebook wasn't quite ready. It's clearly not something that you probably pushed the button on, and yet got that kind of feedback, and you have to wonder.
Male authors do get some abuse. I have seen it. I have friends that have been on the receiving end of it, but, and this is speaking obviously non-scientifically, this is impressions rather than we've done a real study, but it doesn't seem high. I have known very few male authors that were threatened with violence. It's not, I'm going to come over there and kill you. It's, why don't you come out and fight me? Mm-hmm. Which is a very different, both of them are violent statements, but they're very different statements of violence.
Right.
I don't know of many instances where I'm going to kill you, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to do sexual violence to you have been used against a male author. And in fact, in every instance I can think of, it was a threat aimed at that person's wife or significant other. It's not, I'm going to break you, it's, I'm going to break what I perceive as your stuff.
We're starting to get a lot of great reader questions in, which is very exciting.
Yay!
We'll get to that in just a minute, and we hope to see some more. Lots of good questions coming in. Since we're here on International Women's Day, talking and doing this in honor of the Pixel Project, you've been very supportive, and I'm just wondering, can you talk a little bit more about why you support this cause, and whether overall, do you consider yourself a feminist?
I do consider myself a feminist, absolutely, because I believe in equal rights for women. I mean, I believe that men should not be put down for displaying what we view as feminine traits. It's this culture that we've built. Masculinity is a thing where we've said you've got to be a man and you've got to be a man on these 10 points. And as long as we do that, we're putting down femininity by association, which makes it easier to put down women even more. As for why I'm committed to stopping violence toward women, I grew up one of 3 sisters with a single mom. You see a lot of violence toward women in that situation, I think, unless you're a Vanderbilt living in an island in the middle of nowhere, away from no one. I support feminism because I have had to deal with things like, a couple of years ago, someone took a picture of me and Pat Rothfuss, who's a very nice gentleman, on a panel together. And Pat is about the same size I am. He's taller, but he weighs more. So we cut a very similar profile. Both of us could probably stand to cut out the Cheetos a little bit. Actually, I don't eat Cheetos, but you know what I mean. Someone took a picture of the two of us side by side. Now, I am carefully groomed. My hair has been done. I'm wearing a nice shirt. I look kind of fancy. Pat is wearing a t-shirt, has not brushed his hair, and looks like he just rolled out of bed. We all have our aesthetic in this world. But the picture was captioned, "The Distinguished Mr. Rothfuss and the Cheerfully Obese Ms. McGuire."
Wow. Wow.
And that's so casual and so endemic. I don't understand how we have gotten to a point where it is as bad as it is. Because now that it is as bad as it is, when every team you've ever seen, from the Power Rangers on up, has been 4 men and 1 woman, when I say, hey, maybe we could have 2 women and 3 men, or even 3 women and 2 men, there will always be people who don't see that as bringing things more toward the real world. They'll see it as taking opportunities for male characters away. And that's a problem. I don't actually understand how we got that bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to toss it over. We got some great questions coming
Yay!
in. One of them is very relevant. I'll select it here. This author, under the screen name, I believe it's Einken, E-I-N-K-E-N, and they write, how do you explain the eroticism of rape in literature and women's widespread consumption of that type of media? They're specifically thinking about the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon. And now it's just been a movie that did so well. So again, they're trying to, it looks like, get the question of, like, how did you view 50 Shades of Grey? And why do you think that sort of eroticism of rape did so well?
Well, I didn't read 50 Shades of Grey. Not as a bragging point. I just wasn't part of Twilight fandom when that happened. So I don't know how much rape is or is not in there. One thing I do know is that our current culture teaches girls that you don't get to want sex. It's actually a really fascinating reversal from the age of, say, Rudyard Kipling's The Female of the Species, where it was assumed that men were cold and logical and women were hot-blooded and just wanted to procreate. So women used to be all about the sex, and men were all about the not tonight, dear, I have to broker a political treaty. And then it's at a certain point we said, oh, women are all frigid and they don't want the sex. Women innately are not sexual beings and only want to have sex to reproduce. And then suddenly it was cool that men wanted to have sex all the time. Both of these are completely destructive, toxic ideas. I have never known an individual, and I've known a lot of individuals whose sex drive was purely predicated on their gender. Men want sex, women want sex. Men don't want sex, women don't want sex. But a woman who doesn't want sex is frigid and can be thawed out. A man who doesn't want sex is broken. Anyone who's transcribing this, please transcribe my finger quotes because I don't have a better way of indicating sarcasm. So if I spend my entire life telling you that you are not allowed to want sex, you are not allowed to have sexual response, and if you do, you are dirty and bad and wrong and God hates you. But meanwhile, your body is telling you, you know what would be super fun? Some sex. Let's have some sex. Can we have, why are we not having any? I think that I have sexual response because God wanted me to. Suddenly, the idea of bondage, of having that choice taken away, is very appealing, at least fictionally, even for people who would never do that in the real world, because it is sex without sin. If someone ties you to the bed and has sex with you, as long as you know that your heroine is not going to get hurt, as long as you know that she is going to be okay at the end of it, now you're reading a thing where the heroine has not become a dirty, dirty girl to do what she does. And as a consequence, you are not a dirty, dirty girl for reading it. I don't think anyone is a dirty, dirty girl for having consensual sex with anybody, but I think that's a lot of the appeal of the borderline non-consensual fiction, is it is sex that takes the obligation of choice away from a woman who has been told that if she ever chooses sex, she's a whore.
Right, right. Very well said. We're going to shift gears a little bit, more of a broader question on this one from Andrew McQueen, who seems to be a fan of yours. I think this is going to be a hard one, actually, for you. Which character was the best for you to create?
Most of the time, I don't have a conscious and intentional character creation process. They just sort of show up and I build a world around them. Because that is easier than actually having to work for it. But I write this series called Velveteen Verses, which is about a world where essentially a large corporation buys superheroes in childhood and then grooms them to be as marketable and profitable as possible. It was kind of inspired by watching a lot of Hannah Montana while hopped up on cold syrup when I had the flu one night. Because, you know, here's this girl who's just being bought and sold and marketed. So it's this whole world where superheroes are marketed. And my initial cast, my main cast, all did they've just shown up. So I'm just going to write about them. I don't understand what my subconscious does, but it does it pretty well, so I'm going to, fine, you do what you do. And then I hit a point where I realized one of the main characters needed an on-screen girlfriend. And I needed to actually create an on-screen girlfriend for her. And I got to sit down and really, it was like I was playing Champions again in high school. I got to stat out what would a steampunk-themed psychic gadgeteer really look like. And that was super fun, and that's Victoria Cogsworth, who is from a parallel universe, Victorian England, that was destroyed in an unfortunate time machine accident. And she was just so much fun to create. Like, actually getting to create a character is kind of nice once in a while.
That's great. Another popular character is actually the mice, who make another appearance in your latest book. I'll probably butcher. Is it pronounced Aslan mice? Aislinn. Aislinn mice. Yes. I was wondering, how did you come up with the mice that so many readers have come to love?
They just sort of showed up one day and refused to leave. They really had their origins in the old Alice and Thomas stories, which are going to start showing up on my website soon. We finally caught up to that generation. And I liked the idea of having a living black box for this family where people die off all the time. You know, the life expectancy of a Price or a Healy is not very long. But the mice remember everything. My favorite thing about the mice is everyone thinks that they're just so cute. Like, they're adorable. Look at them. Aren't they cute? They are the saddest things in my entire world. Like, imagine not only knowing that there was the divine, but spending time with God, like on just a regular daily basis. You wander around with whatever your personification of God is. God can die, and that happens to the mice about once every 20 years. You know, imagine knowing that you're going to pass from the plane of existence where your gods are, and that you're going to have to wait however long. Their lives are pain. They are super religious, and their lives are pain, and it makes me very happy.
Well, you've certainly changed my perspective on them a little bit here. Another great question, this one from kbspangler. She says, you spoke once about how there are very few good friendships between women in most modern fiction and also in movies. They wanted to, can you go into more detail about that, the lack of great female friendships?
So we have built up this almost toxic idea of the strong female character. And the thing about the strong female character is that the weird emotions, by the way, are I'm trying to get the cat to either jump up or go away. The strong female character is largely defined by how she is not like every other female character around her. It's the I'm not like other girls narrative. And we get that from the Smurfette principle, the thing where there's one girl character allowed in a group of boys. Well, why is that girl special enough to be there? Because she's not like other girls. And once you've said, I'm not like other girls, then anything you do becomes acceptable, whereas other girls doing the same thing is not. So I have read a distressing amount of urban fiction, of urban fantasy and paranormal romance, where your main character, your main female character, will go around calling all of the other female characters sluts for daring to look at one of her 6 boyfriends. You know, for wearing a tight skirt when that same character just lovingly described her leather mini and stiletto heels. And it's distressing. It's like we're recreating the Smurfs over and over. We just have these single female characters moving through an entire world full of men, because otherwise they would not be able to say that they weren't like other girls. There's also an element of the fairest in the land effect. If you take a look at the Disney Princess collection, prior to the inclusion of Anna and Elsa from Frozen, any group shot that showed all of the princesses, none of them would be looking at each other, ever. Their eyes are always fixed on different points of the middle distance, and that's because the only way for me to be absolutely, without question, the fairest in the land is for me to be the only in the land. I cannot allow the possibility that another woman might be smarter or prettier or even just as smart or as pretty. And really getting rid of it is the way to do that. Plus, it is cleaner sometimes not to have to write female friendships, because female friendships are complicated. All friendships are complicated. But my friends and I, we yell at each other, we throw things, we steal tampons, we go to Disney World and get just absolutely plastered drunk at Trader Sam's and then stagger home singing loud Christmas carols for no apparent reason in the middle of July. And that's not a thing that we have been shown many examples of in our fiction. And fiction is what teaches us the shorthand. You know, I talked earlier about how rape has become a shorthand for absolute evil. We have so many quick, easy shorthands for male friendship now. We have the little icons and the little symbols that say to us, these boys are friends. Don't have the little icons and the little symbols that say, these girls are friends.
Right, right.
So you have to work harder to write female friendship.
Right.
I think it's super important, and I think it's super important that as writers we write about women who are not purely invested in tearing each other down.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is from former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. She talks about there's a special circle in hell for women who don't help other women, and that's one that I sometimes enjoy thinking about. I'm really glad you brought up Disney, because actually Disney was going to be one of my questions for you. I know you speak about how you enjoy going to Disneyland sometimes, and I'm curious where you fall in the debate about whether the Disney princesses and Disney characters are help create strong female images for young girls or not. So many girls have toys.
I think it is entirely in how we talk about those characters with our girls and with people. I mean, I hear people saying again and again, well, Ariel gave up her life under the sea and her amazing mermaid existence to be with a man. But part of your world happens before she has made that bargain with the Sea Witch. When we first meet Ariel, she is combing through human ships looking for artifacts because she so desperately wants to know what's beyond the waves. Eric becomes kind of a focal point. He's the final straw. But if you really look at Ariel's actions throughout the movie, she's got this huge cave full of things she's collected that are super precious to her, most of which are functionally unique. If you've only ever seen one music box, then you don't know that they're all over the world. That is the only music box there is. And her father is so upset by seeing her with a statue of a human boy, which is not actually a human boy. He did not find Eric in scuba gear in her bedroom. He found her with a statue that a fish somehow managed to move to that grotto. So, like, that is an important statue. And he doesn't say, Ariel, honey, let's have a talk about why humans are bad. He doesn't say, Ariel, honey, humans killed your mom. He says, oh my God, I'm going to break all of your stuff. I mean, you want an example of violence toward women? He directly aims the trident at Ariel at one point because she's trying to defend the statue of Eric. Sebastian pulls the trident aside, but for a moment it really looks like Triton's just going to blast his kid. He's just going to vaporize his daughter. Ariel is not a girl who gave up everything for a man. Ariel is a girl who said, my domestic situation is terrible, my father is scary, and I have a chance to have everything I've ever wanted. Wow. Eric is an excuse. And that is just as valid an interpretation of the movie. So much of is anyone a strong X character is how we talk them with the kids who are going to be internalizing them and taking them as role models. Snow White's not useless. Snow White is a teenage girl who's just been driven from the only home she's ever known and finds a way to secure herself safety and shelter in the middle of a dark, scary forest. Cinderella is a font of unbreakable optimism and positivity. I don't love everything Disney has done. I am highly critical of a lot of the things Disney has done, but we can't just say, oh, all of these characters are bad for girls without acknowledging the part that we play as adult women in shaping how girls will see their narrative. Yeah.
That's a great point. And the next question from reader Sarah Glassman sort of dovetails off this. She says, can you speak a little bit about book covers, especially in urban fantasy? Jim Hines' cover pose his cover poses helped bring attention to the often ridiculous poses that female characters are put into, even in urban fantasy. Do you have a take on your own covers and those of others?
I love my covers so much. I do. I really love my covers. Daw, who has done all of my urban fantasy covers, has been amazing. I don't have so one thing that's a little bit important, just because it's come up before, so I'm going to digress. 99.9% of authors who are publishing through traditional publishing do not have cover approval. We may have what's called cover consultation, where we get to talk about what the cover will look like. We can even be shown early sketches and say, I like this one, but I don't like that one. But at the end of the day, our publishers get to go with whatever it is they want. So if you don't like a cover, if you think this is overly sexualized, this is inappropriate, this is bad, this is a bad cover, don't tell the author. The odds are good that we had that fight with our publisher before you ever saw the book. You can reach most of our publishers on social media. Tell them. Say, you know, hey, at Big Publisher, I really loved Heather Long's new book, Pixel Project, but that cover was completely inappropriate. Could we get better covers? Don't tweet Heather and tell her, hey, did you know? She knows. She does not need to be told. That being said, Daw has been amazing. When we had my cover consultation for Toby, they said, what do you want? And I said, well, I would really like her to be wearing clothes. Like, that was the whole of my position. I said, I really, really want her to be wearing clothing. And they got Chris McGrath, who has done the Dresden Files covers in addition to a whole lot of other urban fantasy. But what is really interesting about the October Day books, and you can see the covers for some of them on the Pixel Project wallpaper that's available through the Indiegogo page, or you can just type October Day into a search engine and take a look. The way Toby is consistently posed on those covers, they are basically male urban fantasy covers that just happen to have a female protagonist. She's never sexualized. She's never helpless. She's always armed. She's always female. There have been no covers, really, where you'd look at it and go, is that a boy or a girl? Not that gender fluid individuals do not also get to exist on book covers. Oh, here comes a Toby book, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've got the first one,
see,
the latest.
There's Rosemary and Rue. And Toby just is posed like a male character on an urban fantasy cover.
Right.
Female characters frequently wind up in the leather pants with their butt toward the camera, missing their head, whatever. But I think part of that is that urban fantasy is the confluence of two separate genres. Urban fantasy, which grew up out of dark fantasy, as exemplified by Border Town, War for the Oaks, all of that in the 1980s, and paranormal romance, which grew up out of science fiction and fantasy romance. So you have the romancier covers on the paranormal romances and the fancier covers on the urban fantasies. And sometimes it can be hard to tell what you're getting. Now, what I think is interesting is the encrypted covers, which I love. I actually petitioned for the artist who does those. I fought so hard to get them to let me have him. And the cover for Discount Armageddon, which has Verity in a miniskirt and high heels on a rooftop, is exactly what I asked for, because it is accurate to the character. I wanted to get across that this is a character who is a cocktail waitress, who is also a ballroom dancer, who has no problem with any of this. My objection to the bad cover poses is character. You need to have decent anatomy. You know, don't break her back. Don't be an Escher girl. But also, Toby would never wear what Verity wears. It just would not happen. Verity, on the other hand, would wear what Toby wears because she is comfortable in both modes and has shown up in both modes. I think that is where frequently the urban fantasy stuff falls down in cover poses, in that we are using, okay, black leather trousers mean urban fantasy, without stopping to ask ourselves, but would Sarah Tapper, the shy telepath who lives in calf-length skirts, actually go out in public in black leather trousers?
Right. I want to get through a couple more questions before our hour is up. A nice general one. What is the most challenging aspect of being an urban fantasy writer? You've sort of touched on a little bit of it so far tonight in the discussion, but perhaps there's another element you'd like to hit on.
Honestly, the most challenging aspect, sadly, is sexism. There's this huge assumption that urban fantasy is a girly genre, that it is a genre with cooties somehow, that only the men who are working in urban fantasy have anything new or interesting to say. The number of times I've met people who have said, you're the only female urban fantasy author I read, but I read, Jim Butcher and this, that, and the other. Like, I should be proud of myself for being not like other girls. I'm not. I'm not proud of myself for that. I'm glad that you read me, because every time you buy a book, you feed my cats, and that makes me very happy. That is my primary mechanism for trying to sell books, is just posting pictures of them on my cats, going, please feed the cat, because the cat will eat me.
Very effective. I saw one today.
Yeah, but that is the most challenging aspect. You mentioned at the beginning of this hangout that I'm also Mira Grant.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I am Mira Grant is partially that we knew that a portion of my target audience, the people that would really enjoy the work I was doing as Mira, for whom the work I was doing as Mira would mean something, would not pick that work up if an urban fantasy author's name was on the cover.
Wow. Wow.
So that is the most challenging part, is people are so dismissive of my genre, when really urban fantasy is incredibly old. Fairy tales are the urban fantasy of their time. When those were being told, you knew people whose grandmothers lived on the other side of a forest and who sometimes had to send the kids with baskets of bread when grandma wasn't feeling well. Those are modern and relevant in the right context.
Right, right. I wonder if we could take the discussion one level up. Some Comic-Cons now have very clear guidelines in an effort to prevent sexual harassment. Unfortunately, they need those. What's your view on sexual harassment at cons and in the geek world in general? We've touched a little bit on this, but is there anything more you'd like to add?
Most of us are really, really aware of when the person that we're talking to is saying no. Every study that's been done has shown that most of us, and I do mean most of us, can pick up on nonverbal no's. And women especially are socialized not to give a hard verbal no, because frankly we do not wish to be hit. And a hard verbal no can sometimes trigger unfortunate violence. We do have the not all men, not all individuals statements, and those are totally valid. The problem is, if one person out of 100 is going to punch me in the face for saying no to them, then 100 people are going to get told, I'm so sorry, I have to stay home and watch the cat. We know when people don't want us doing things, and we know when we're doing stuff that we wouldn't do to our moms. Yeah. So we shouldn't be doing it. Now, I have heard people say that the crackdown on harassment at conventions is going to mean that no one can date, no one can hook up, no one can flirt. That is not true. That has never been true. Harassment requires intent. It requires being consistent. It requires being personal. If I met Heather at a convention and thought that she was attractive, you are very pretty, Heather, but not in this context. But if I met Heather at a convention and thought she was attractive, I could walk up to Heather and say, hi, would you like to have a cup of coffee? Would you like to go and talk somewhere? Depending on the convention and where I met her, if I met her at a certain kind of party, I could walk up to her and say, hi, I have a hotel room. Would you like to go become naked? None of that is harassment. It becomes harassment when she says, no, thank you, or I'm kind of busy, or I'm with my friends, and I push, and I keep going. I had an interesting moment a couple of years ago at a Comic-Con that had not yet put a clear harassment policy in place, where I was talking to a fan of mine dressed as Emma Frost. She dressed as Emma Frost to make me happy. I have never felt so much like a rock star. But I was talking to a fan of mine dressed as Emma Frost, and several men came up and started taking pictures of her without her permission, without asking her if she'd like to pose, without in any way getting a signal. And you can get signals for candids. You can get that indication that it's okay. So she stopped them. She put out her hand and kind of covered herself and said, I will let you take my picture if you can tell me who I am dressed as. Now, she was very clearly Emma Frost. If you have any knowledge of Marvel Comics at all, she was absolutely Emma Frost. No question. None of the men who had come up out of nowhere to take her picture without permission knew who she was dressed as.
Wow. Wow.
We're the ones that get the fake geek girl thing and the, oh, you know, you need to prove your credentials and girls only get into comics to get boys. But 8 men with long telephoto lenses who were aiming them at her breasts and butt rather than at her as an entire person could not identify Emma Frost in the middle of San Diego Comic-Con. And that's why we need harassment policies.
That's pretty telling. I want to hit on one more reader question before our hour ends. This is from a fan named Christopher Rice, and he wants to know what role-playing games. Do you play role-playing games? And he suggests that Toby's Universe would be a very good scenario to do as a role-playing game.
It would, and if anyone would like to license that, I would be totally down with it. I don't currently, I don't write RPGs. I don't currently play any role-playing games because I just don't have time. I was a big fan of the original World of Darkness from White Wolf. I played a lot of Mage and a lot of Ars Magica. I have played every known Hermetic house, including several of the minors that did not make it to the modern day. Like 4 of you out there are now going, oh my god, she's such a nerd, and the rest of you are just looking politely blank, and that's okay. I ran the big Teenagers from Outer Space TFOS tournament at my local gaming con for 6 years. We would have 4 tables going so that we'd have the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior classes, and I'd have 4 GMs and just wander around the room shouting plot points and flinging candy. I used to be a big LARPer, so giant nerd. My most recent game that folded because we just didn't have time was actually a Firefly RPG, and I played our ship's Gun Bunny. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. So I do love role-playing games. I just don't have a local group right now.
Well, it sounds like there's potential there, and hopefully maybe Christopher knows someone who can help make it happen. Toby. Lastly, I'm sure everyone wants to know, I know you're in the midst of promoting your current book, Pocket Apocalypse, but can you tell us a little bit about...
It's just fun to say.
Yeah, it's great. It rolls off the tongue. It's a good tongue twister for your mouth. But can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now? And many of us who are fans of the Toby series, is September still the date that we'll get the next book?
September 1st is going to be A Red Rose Chain, which is book 9. I'm currently about halfway through writing book 10. Because that's how we roll. We are under contract through book 13. That does not mean it's a 13-book series. It means we're under contract through book 13. So hopefully the books will continue to sell well. We'll be able to continue, doing more. I love Toby. For those who are now concerned because of that last statement, I always know where the exit is. And my publisher has promised me that I will know by book 12 if we're not continuing, so I'll be able to get to the exit. It'll just be a little more untidy than I would like it to be. Encrypted is the March book.
Yep.
And next March we'll be going back to Verity with Chaos Choreography. And that series is confirmed through book 7. So after Chaos Choreography, we'll have Magic for Nothing and Tricks for Free, both of which will center on her younger sister, Antimony. And the next Mira Grant book is actually coming out just next month in April. It's called Rolling in the Deep. And it's what happens when they ask Mira Grant to write about mermaids, which is a terrible, terrible plan because Mira is founded on science and being horrible to you. So it is horrible science mermaids eating the faces off of anything that comes within range of them. And then the Parasitology trilogy will conclude in November with Chimera, and that has a very yellow cover. It will be difficult to miss on shelves. Like it's brighter than the wall of my room behind me.
We know it's one of your favorite colors. Well, orange and mauve.
Orange is my favorite color.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Some great questions tonight for Seanan McGuire, and we really appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy tour schedule to be with the Pixel Project tonight. I just want to wrap up by not just thanking Seanan, but also thanking her for the wonderful perks she has donated to the Read for Pixels Indiegogo campaign. I'll see if I can flash up on the screen here, just where to go. There we go.
There you go.
All right, where to go to see that. There's one opportunity left to have Seanan do a handwritten sonnet or drabble, or even, I guess, a 100-word short story. And all you have to do is submit a word to her and pick that out on the Indiegogo campaign. So, Thank you again, Seanan, for a wonderful discussion tonight about the very important topic here on International Women's Day of what we can do to promote women, promote female leaders, and especially to end violence against women.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.